What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. We hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you're excited to talk about the franchise tag. This is an important week in the NFL. Obviously, it's the offseason, but in the NFL, there really is no offseason. And this Tuesday, February 21st, 2023, is the first day in which NFL teams can place the franchise tag on players if they would like to do so. In case you have no idea, the franchise tag is basically sort of a last resort for NFL teams with players that are on expiring contracts. If you do not want to lose a player, you can place the franchise tag on them, and you are committing to paying them the average of the top 5 highest paid players at that particular position. So if you place the franchise tag on a quarterback, you are paying him for that particular season the average of the top 5 highest paid quarterbacks across the NFL. Hopefully that makes sense. In case you are also unaware, the franchise tag is fully guaranteed. It's not a contract with some guaranteed money. It is 100% fully guaranteed. That is part of what makes the franchise tag so interesting for some players. But obviously, while it's fully guaranteed, it does not come with the long-term security that a long-term contract comes with. There are pros and cons, as obviously is always the case for all things, not just in football, but in life as well. So in case you're unaware, the Dallas Cowboys have used the franchise tag on a player 5 seasons running. That is correct. 5 years in a row, the Dallas Cowboys have placed the franchise tag on one player or another. But over those 5 years, they have only placed the tag on 3 total players. And the reason for that is because the Cowboys placed the franchise tag on both DeMarcus Lawrence and Dak Prescott 2 years in a row. This is a history of the Dallas Cowboys franchise tag situation. As you can see, last year they placed the tag on Dalton Schultz. We're going to talk about him in a minute. But the 2 years before that, in 2021 and 2020, the Cowboys placed the franchise tag on Dak Prescott. They gave him $68 million over the course of those 2 tags, and those obviously became important figures in the long-term extension that the team ultimately did sign Dak Prescott to shortly after giving him the tag for the second time. The same exact situation basically happened from a principal standpoint with DeMarcus Lawrence. They tagged him in 2018. He played on it. They tagged him again in 2019. And a lot of times teams will tag a player just to buy time because you do have until July 15th to negotiate a long-term contract with them. They got that done with Lawrence in 19. They got it done with Prescott in 21. As you can see, the Cowboys also placed the franchise tag on Dez Bryant in 2015. They ultimately did get a long-term deal done there as well. Anthony Spencer was kind of a unique situation. The Cowboys did tag him 2 years in a row as well. Ken Hamlin and Flozell Adams, the other players to get the franchise tag from the Cowboys. So the Cowboys have tagged a player twice, not once, not twice, but 3 times in a row, and they've actually done it twice in a row. So if the Cowboys were to tag Dalton Schultz here in 2023, it would be the second year in a row for him. In case you do not know, players obviously can be tagged the second year in a row, but if you tag a player for the second year in a row, you are committing to paying them 120% of their previous year's salary. So if you take a look, we'll put this back up on the screen here for you. Dalton Schultz got almost $11 million from the Cowboys on the tag throughout the 2022 season. If the Cowboys did tag him again for the second year in a row here in 2023, they would be committing to paying him about $13 million for the 2023 season. So you could look at that. And again, we're kind of rounding here. We'll call it $13 million. We'll call it $11 million last year for Schultz. That comes out to basically a 2-year, $24 million contract, each of those years fully guaranteed for Dalton Schultz. So the Cowboys could have effectively gotten him done with a long-term contract last year that averaged a rate of $12 million. It's one way to look at it. It's a little bit of hindsight, but you get the picture. The franchise tag can be an interesting sort of thing. So what are the values? We talked about the top 5, average, et cetera, et cetera. These are the values for positions, and all of this information, comes to us via Spot Track. But we don't have to worry about quarterbacks. Cowboys not going to tag one. But if the Cowboys were, you look at, say, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens, Daniel Jones and the New York Giants, the tag value, this is the franchise tag. We're not going to spend any time today on the transition tag. It is kind of a subset of this whole situation. But if the Ravens tag Lamar Jackson, it would be for $32.416 million here in 2023. You obviously know how to read. Linebacker would be just under $21 million. Wide receiver, almost $20 million. We don't have to worry about any of these positions like wide receiver, defensive end, defensive tackle, offensive lineman, or corner. The 4 positions that we're going to be focusing on for the Cowboys are the tight end, although that $11.345 million figure is not accurate for the Cowboys because, again, they tagged Dalton Schultz a year ago. But tight end is one. Running back, obviously, and Tony Pollard, almost $11 million there. We've obviously got linebacker to look at as far as Leighton Vander is concerned, and even safety, if we want to talk about all realistic, somewhat realistic options for the Cowboys to place the franchise tag on, because Donovan Wilson is on an expiring contract as well. So the way I see it, the Cowboys do have 4 options in terms of players they could consider placing the franchise tag on. We're going to go in order. not necessarily of most likely, because we're going to start with Dalton Schultz. I do not personally think it's likely that the Cowboys place the tag on Dalton Schultz because it would be for the second year in a row. And when you factor in everything, the fact that Schultz missed some time this past season, he did have a great game in the playoff win against the Buccaneers, but kind of had a poor showing, certainly near the end of the game in the playoff loss to the 49ers. It didn't feel like Dalton Schultz was one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Now, to be clear, who are the best tight ends in the NFL, right? It's kind of a very particular group at the very top. You've got Travis Kelce, you've got George Kittle. I think Dallas Goedert belongs in that list. Dalton Schultz flirts with that, but are you going to pay him $12 million a year over the last 2 years to be that guy for you? While he has had a lot of production with Dak Prescott as his quarterback, there are questions there. And not only are there questions there are now options there. The Cowboys drafted Jake Ferguson in the 4th round last year. He really came on as a rookie. He caught the eye of Travis Kelce. You may have seen Travis give him some hype in the lead into the Super Bowl. Peyton Hendershot was an undrafted free agent. I mean, the Cowboys are kind of in this place now that it took them a long time to get to. And that's a good thing because Jason Witten was a wonderful player for the Cowboys. They never had to worry about, any sort of change or turnover at the tight end position. But the Cowboys now finally have to kind of figure this thing out. You may recall the Cowboys actually drafted Dalton Schultz like 2 days or 3 days, whatever it was, after Jason Witten retired for the first time. And he turned into a wonderful player for them, despite really not ever being the top option for the first 2 years of his career, because that 2018 season was kind of a big old question mark. Blake Jarwin had the big game at the end of the regular season. And in 2019, Jason Witten came back. So in 2020, Dalton Schultz was kind of an afterthought. It was supposed to be Blake Jarwin's job. He had gotten a contract extension the offseason prior, but he got hurt in the season opener. In 2020, with Dak Prescott missing a lot of time, Dalton Schultz was a wonderful option. He was a great player for them in 2021. Obviously, 2022 missed some time with injuries, but I think it's just time to move on. So while I don't think this is the most likely, we are starting with it because the Cowboys did tag him a year ago. The $13 million for Dalton Schultz in 2023 just feels kind of rich. It will be interesting to see where he does wind up if he goes somewhere else. Does he follow Kellen Moore to the Los Angeles Chargers the way that Doug Nussmeier did? Do we see that with some other players on the Cowboys? Maybe Cooper Rush? I don't know. But either way, it does feel unlikely, in my opinion, that the Cowboys could ultimately tag Dalton Schultz for the second year in a row. Now, this is the second option, but I do think this is the most likely recipient of the tag for the Cowboys. And to be very clear, the Cowboys don't have to tag anybody. They could choose not to tag anybody whatsoever, but it is important to note that they have done so 5 years in a row. That being said, if the Cowboys place the tag on anybody here in 2023, in my mind, it's going to be running back Tony Pollard. And there are a lot of tentacles to this discussion. We'll put the values back up here on the screen. You should still be able to see it. It's just under $11 million. So again, if you have no idea what the franchise tag is and you go down this path as the Cowboys, obviously they have an idea, but I'm talking to you specifically. What this means, if the Cowboys place the tag on Tony Pollard, it means that they are committing to paying him, we're going to round here again, $11 million for the 2023 season specifically. Now, obviously, Tony Pollard suffered the injury and the playoff loss in San Francisco. And while that is unfortunate and is really devastating because Tony Pollard, like every player, deserves to get paid as much as he possibly can, it is an important factor in terms of all of the contract discussions that he's going to be a part of. Now, the Cowboys could decide to just let Tony Pollard walk. The Cowboys could decide to let Tony Pollard hit free agency, test free agency, see if he gets an offer he likes or doesn't like, and maybe he ultimately returns to the team. There are a lot of ways that you can approach this. I don't have a passionate take about this one way or the other. I can talk myself into tagging Tony Pollard, giving him $11 million because it's a one-year commitment, right? That's kind of the luxury of the tag. If things don't work out with him this season or whatever the case may be, you can move on, let him sign elsewhere in 2024. And it's possible, obviously, especially I think if Tony Pollard isn't having a great season, that the Cowboys themselves aren't in a great place in 2024. Maybe they move on from Mike McCarthy. Maybe they decide they want to start moving on from Dak Prescott. Maybe there is an overall franchise reset coming for this team a year from now. That's just one of many possibilities. But you don't want to be stuck to long-term contracts if that's the case. And you certainly don't want to be stuck to a long-term contract with a running back if that is the case. We know that lesson very well as Dallas Cowboys fans. And so while it's likely that the Cowboys approach Zeke Elliott about a pay cut or maybe move on from him, it's possible that Tony Pollard is also gone. It's possible the Cowboys have Malik Davis and some rookie that they draft or some other free agent. This is a very, very, very deep free agency class as far as the running back position is concerned. You could be looking at 3 running backs just in the NFC East that are all in free agency. And obviously they're different players, but Tony Pollard is obviously one. Saquon Barkley could be a free agent, especially if the Giants choose to use the franchise tag on Daniel Jones. And Miles Sanders is going to be a free agent coming off the Super Bowl loss with the Eagles, by the way. Super Bowl loss with the Eagles. So I can talk myself into both sides of it. If I have to pick one way, if I have to pick something I want to do, it's probably not to tag Tony Pollard. I think it's probably in the team's best interest to see things, feel things out, let things play themselves out. Because again, it's possible that the injury has unfortunately spooked a lot of teams. And we've seen this before. We've seen players return to the Cowboys and say, you know what? I'm just going to take a 1-year prove it deal with you. I'll take 1 year and I'll reset, re-hit the market next year, and I'll get paid then. Maybe you convince Tony Pollard to do that, and you obviously don't have to pay the franchise tag value. It's not fully guaranteed. Maybe they give him a fully guaranteed contract. But my point is, at that point, you have options with Tony Pollard. So I think he's the most likely to get it, but I don't think it's likely necessarily. But I think it's very close. I think it's kind of a 51-49, 52-48 sort of situation with Tony Pollard potentially getting the franchise tag with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I mentioned a 1-year prove-it deal for Pollard. I think that makes sense. Again, we see that a lot with different players, not just with the Cowboys, but players throughout the league. But one player who we did see it with the Cowboys specifically a year ago was Leighton Vander. Now, Leighton Vander was a first-round pick of the Dallas Cowboys back in 2018. And ever since 2011, players drafted in the first round have a 5th-year option on their rookie contract. NFL teams must decide before the player begins their 4th season in the offseason, obviously, whether or not they want to pick up that 5th-year option. So as the example pertaining to this year, the Dallas Cowboys have to decide this offseason whether or not they want to pick up CeeDee Lamb's 5th-year option. Obviously, they do. But the Cowboys chose not to pick up Leighton Vander Esch's 5th-year option 2 years ago. Entering that 2021 season, Leighton Vander Esch had played 3 seasons for the Cowboys, and they did not pick up his 5th-year option. I mentioned this all began in 2011. There are 2 players who the Dallas Cowboys have taken in the first round since 2011 who they have not picked up the 5th-year option for. The first one was their 2012 first-round pick, Morris Claiborne, obviously who they traded up to draft, and 2018's first-round pick in Leighton Vander Esch. But both of those players, Claiborne and Vander Esch, did return for a 5th year with the Cowboys. They both did it on 1-year prove-it deals. Morris Claiborne returned for that 2016 season, and Leighton Vander Esch returned, obviously, for this past 2022 season. But Leighton Vander Esch had an amazing season. We all obviously know how important he is to this team. That was really apparent when he missed time. Are the Cowboys going to want to bring him back? Do they feel confident in the future of the young linebacking core? Maybe they feel like Jabril Cox can turn it around in his 3rd season. Obviously, Damone Clark was a revelation late in the season. Devin Harper's another name. I mean, these are all just the linebackers literally on the roster, and there is going to be the draft. There is going to be free agency. Maybe the Cowboys do want to fill that hole or fill that void at a lower cost, and we'll see if Anthony Barr is back. But you get my point. I don't think it's likely that Leighton Vander Esch gets the franchise tag for the Cowboys, but it's possible they feel like he's somebody who they simply cannot afford to lose. And it's possible that they tag him to buy time, but it is a pretty high cost to tag Leighton Vander Esch. The tag value for linebackers here in 2023 is the 2nd highest of any position. Quarterback, obviously, the highest, almost $21 million the Cowboys would have to commit to Leighton Vander Esch for the 2023 season alone. That just seems really unlikely to me. Again, Leighton Vander Esch is an important player. It would be awesome if the Cowboys were able to bring him back. In fact, I think there's an argument to be made that he is the most important free agent who the Cowboys need to bring back this offseason, but it just does not feel like it is going to be on the franchise tag. That's just kind of the way this goes. And finally, to wrap this up, safety Donovan Wilson, also on an expiring contract. The Cowboys took Donovan Wilson in the 6th round back in 2019, so his rookie contract with the team is up. But kind of working against Donovan Wilson, beyond the fact that the Cowboys don't really love to pay safeties, is that they were able to lock 2 down a year ago. It was last year, just last offseason, when the Cowboys signed not just Jaron Kearse, but also Malik Hooker to 2-year deals. That means the Cowboys have, entering this season, Jaron Kearse under contract, Malik Hooker under contract, and Israel Mukuamu under contract. Obviously, they have Marquise Bell, who was an undrafted free agent a year ago. And I know that Israel Mukuamu has played corner and things like that, and positions really don't mean much to Dan Quinn as far as the secondary is concerned. We know how he likes to use Jaron Kearse and all these players up in the box. But that being said, it is technically an option to tag Donovan Wilson if you want to be legitimate about it. We'll take that off so you can see it. The safety position, this year's tag value, almost $14.5 million. Again, feels really unlikely given that the Cowboys are in a position where they have some safeties for much cheaper contracts that they don't have to pay a lot of money. But it is technically one place they could go. And we're exploring all options, exploring all possibilities. I would be very shocked to see the Cowboys tag Donovan Wilson, but it is something at least worth saying out loud. So that's what we did. So again, we talked about Dalton Schultz, Tony Pollard, Leighton Vander Esch, and Donovan Wilson. I think it's unlikely that the Cowboys use the tag in general, but again, crazier things have certainly happened. My name is RJ Ochoa. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at RJ Ochoa, on TikTok, rj.ochoa. You can send me an email, rj.ochoa@sbnation.com. You can also leave a comment down below. We'll do our best to get to those. I wrote about this subject as well. If you want to look at these values and these ideas a little bit more in detail, check out bloggingtheboys.com. But yeah, the offseason rolls along. And like I told you, we're not going anywhere. We have more stuff coming out here on the YouTube channel. So please make sure to subscribe. We're on the road to 20,000 subscribers. Appreciate those of you who have been with us since day one and all of you who have come along for the ride ever since then. But for now, let's go ahead and get out of here. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. I will see you next time.